Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking a closer look at a watch that's been called a brutalist masterpiece.
That's the Zenith Defy Revival Shadow diver.
Exactly. It mixes this vintage feel with something really modern, almost edgy.
It's a fascinating piece.
Yeah, so in this deep dive, we're going to explore what makes it stand out. We're drawing from a pretty detailed review looking at the design, the materials, its whole vibe, really. Our mission for you listening is to kind of shortcut you to understanding this watch, give you those aha moments about the design choices, the innovation, all that good stuff in the watch world.
Definitely.
So first impressions. The review mentions this immediate pull. It's described as small, dark, weird, vintagey, but also having a 90s thing going on.
Right.
And apparently it just sank its titanium teeth into the reviewer almost instantly. It sounds, well, paradoxical. What is it about that?
Well, Zenith's Shadow watches, this one included, they are deliberately different. They stand apart in the collection. They've used microblasted titanium quite intentionally here. It gives it this subtle charcoal tone. It's definitely more nuanced than just a black coating.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, it creates this effect of light and dark all in one, makes them instantly recognizable, and pretty captivating.
So that microblasted titanium, it's key to its identity. But what exactly does that shadow treatment do that, say, a standard PVD coating wouldn't?
Well, it's not just about the color, see? Microblasting affects the texture and how the light interacts with it. So unlike a flat black finish, this creates more of a play between light and shadow. It gives the metal this depth.
Almost organic.
Yeah, something like that. It's that more nuanced than black coatings idea, creating that light and dark in one package. It makes the titanium more than just lightweight. It gives it a real visual character, sets it apart.
Okay, interesting. And then within that look, this specific model does something pretty bold. It adds color.
The neon yellow.
Yeah, shocks of neon yellow, as the review puts it. And it's the only shadow model with color, right?
That's right. It was definitely a choice.
The review calls it a love it or leave it hue, but says the risk paid off. Does adding such a almost aggressive color, does that risk turning off people looking for something more traditional? Or is that kind of the point? It's charm.
That really gets to the design philosophy, doesn't it? How do you use a color that bold, that potentially divisive, and make it work? Yeah. The fact the review says it paid off suggests that contrast, the bright neon against the muted, textured titanium, it creates this tension that actually enhances the watch. Makes it memorable because it's audacious.
Right, it leans into it.
Exactly, it doesn't shy away.
And speaking of bold choices, that word brutalism keeps popping up. We hear it thrown around a bit with watches. But how does this Defy Shadow actually embody being beautifully brutal?
Well, when you apply brutalism here, you're talking about the case shape. It's blocky, faceted, kind of imposing, actually.
Even though it's small.
Yeah, even though it's relatively small, the review mentions it being dark and drab, almost like concrete in its finish.
Like brutalist architecture.
Precisely. It connects back to the original 1969 design intentions, and this modern titanium version really captures that through and through. The titanium, while obviously not concrete, gives a similar raw industrial feel, form-following function, but in a very stark way, powerful presence.
Okay, so let's get into the specifics of that form. The case. It's octagonal, compact but dense. Dimensions are 37.4 by 44 millimeters, right? And 15.5 millimeters thick. How does something not huge feel so substantial?
It's clever engineering, really. The review notes it's physically relatively small, yet has a sense of mass that belies its size.
Okay.
That 15.5 millimeter thickness, which does sound like a lot for the diameter, is handled well. There's a fairly thin mid-case that sort of visually slims it down.
Hides the height a bit.
Exactly. It ends up feeling pleasantly chunky, not just like a thick slab. And that chunkiness, well, it's also needed for the water resistance. It's about 600 meters. Pretty serious.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, moving to the bezel and dial. The bezel's described as thin but grippy. 120 clicks. And it's a skinny dive bezel. What does that mean for the look?
That thinness allows for a comparatively large dial opening.
So the dial looks bigger.
Yeah, which is important on a smaller watch. It stops it feeling cramped. And the insert itself, that's where you get that piercing yellow with a slight acid green tinge.
Like Mountain Dew tennis ball highlighter colors, the review said.
Yeah, those kinds of colors. So even though the bezel ring is thin, that intense color gives it more than enough punch.
There's also this other detail mentioned, a secondary fixed bezel with 14 sides, creating a gap.
An unusual detail.
The source says it adds to the brutal charm. Is that just aesthetic, or does it do anything?
It seems mostly aesthetic, but it does connect back to that brutalist, maybe even slightly 70s industrial diver look. Less polished, more tool-like, not perfectly flush like most modern divers.
So it reinforces that hard lines, good times vibe.
I think so, yeah. It definitely contributes. Now, the dial itself, interestingly, is called quite tame once you get past that big yellow ring.
Really?
Yeah. Matte black surface, standard loomed markers. The yellow hands give it that final sing, but otherwise it's pretty straightforward. Period correct is how it's described, but it still feels modern.
But the source also notes it doesn't have a particularly high-end look. And given the price, that may irk some folks. Is that fair? Or is it just part of the tool watch thing?
They also wished for a color-matched date wheel.
Yeah, that's a classic debate, isn't it? Value perception. For a tool watch, maybe a super luxe dial isn't the point.
Right. Authenticity over polish.
Perhaps. The period-correct design fits the tool watch idea Zenith seems to be going for, and the date wheel. Yeah, color-matched is nice, but maybe not having it reinforces that rugged, no-frills identity. Even if, at this price, some might expect that detail.
Fair enough. Let's talk bracelet. Matching microblasted titanium, 18 millimeter, tapering down to just over 16 millimeters. Sounds quite slim.
It is, yeah. 18 millimeter lug width tapers to 16.25 millimeter before the clasp. And the design. Cool 5-link with flat links and beads of rice. What's that like?
It's described as just different enough to be interesting. The finish, again, looks incredible with that microblast. Apparently, it's easy to adjust to single-sided screws.
Nice. And the clasp.
Compact. It doesn't have that on-the-fly micro-adjust some divers have now, but it does have adjustment points and a built-in dive extension. Pretty functional for a tool watch.
So how does this all feel on the wrist? Sometimes these really distinct designs look cool, but wear awkwardly.
Nope, sounds like it's fantastic on the wrist. That's the feedback. Despite the specs, it has presence, but isn't a slab.
The thickness feels okay.
Yeah, apparently it feels right, reinforcing the ruggedness. And the big factor is the titanium. It's light. Only 95 grams on the bracelet.
Wow, compared to steel.
About 33% lighter. That makes a huge difference in greater comfort. Plus, you can get it on a tropic rubber strap, too, even lighter. And they put the crown where it won't dig into your wrist.
Smart. Thinking about the aesthetics again, this dark titanium. The review mentions a hint of warmth, says it looks genuinely different.
Yeah, that's a key advantage over, say, PVD or DLC black coatings. This can look very flat, sometimes too intense.
Right.
This microblasted titanium has a bit more life to it, that subtle warmth. It lets the neon yellow pop, but as the review says, without being obnoxious, bright, but contained.
And practical, too.
Definitely. That matte finish doesn't show fingerprints like polished or even some brushed finishes do. Big plus for a watch you're meant to handle.
Okay, let's get under the hood. The engine here is the Zenith Elite 670 caliber. What can you tell us about that? It's in-house, right?
Yep, in-house. The Elite 670 actually debuted back in 1994. It's automatic, 27 joules, got a decent 50-hour power reserve, date function, hacking seconds, runs at 28,800 beats per hour. Pretty standard modern specs.
And it's known for being thin.
Yeah, that was one of its design goals. It's around 3.4 millimeter thick, which is quite slender, allows for slimmer cases usually.
But this movement is visible through the case back on the Shadow Diver.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, because the original it's based on had a solid back. Was seeing the movement really necessary here for a tool watch revival?
That's a great question. It touches on modern expectations versus, historical accuracy or tool watch purity.
Right.
The 670 is decorated. It's got circular Côte de Genève, some perlage, a skeletonized rotor. It looks nice, but the review does question if seeing it was necessary, especially given the original solid back.
So it's a bit of a debate, style versus tool watch ethos.
Kind of. Does the modern desire to see the mechanics sometimes conflict with the core identity of a watch designed originally as a pure, rugged tool? It's something to think about.
So stepping back, the original 1969 Defy, the A3648, the review suggests it might have been peak dive watch design. Compact, unique, tough, super water resistant.
Yeah, it really was something. Makes you wonder, have we mostly gone sideways or even backwards since then, with so many huge divers offering similar or sometimes less water resistance? Zenith bringing this specific design back, especially in this shadow format, was a really smart move. It shows they're not just about the El Primero chronograph. They make a killer diver, too.
Definitely broadens their appeal.
For sure.
So this Zenith Defy Revival Shadow Diver, it really does seem to challenge what we think of as a luxury watch, doesn't it?
It does.
It makes you consider, does a tool watch look and feel, even at a higher price, offer a kind of authentic, maybe more lasting value than something overtly flashy?
That's a great point. Or maybe, how does this specific mix the brutalism, that neon pop, how does it push the boundaries of what we find beautiful and functional in a watch today?
Yeah, definitely something to think about next time you're looking at watches.